Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am the Quiet Warrior. I'm excited to have on the show today a special guest, Mr. Noel Bentley. Hey, Noel, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tom, how are you doing today?
Hey, you know what? Social isolation, but now I feel happy because I got you to look at. So,
I'm glad this isn't actually video recorded. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. And for the audience, we were just riffing before I started. So, Noel, just hang tight there. I'm gonna just say a couple of things how we met. This is a special interview to me. Noel and I met through my recent TEDx talk, and that story will unfold, I'm sure, in his story. And well, we're here to have some fun today. So, Noel, this is all about you. Tell us a bit about yourself.
A bit about myself. Well, my wife and I are here living now in South Surrey, and everything about me now seems to be about public speaking. It's just where my life has gone in the past, say, 3 to 4 years. But I'm just the type of person that seems to every few years, everything changes. You know, we've moved a lot. I've had different jobs. I'd call myself a jack of all trades if I was better at some things, but I like to dabble in all sorts of little things. Writing and photography especially used to be a big passion of mine. And way back in life, I used to enjoy recruiting, and I don't know, it just keeps going on and on. It's like there's always a cycle, and maybe this is the time we're going to go to the next one.
Well, there you go. I'll be careful not to call you Jack as I interview. So I asked you to come on the show for many reasons, obviously because we have a good relationship we built, but I want to build you up a bit. This is a show where we say there's no egos. You know, we open the door to sharing everything and being authentic. But everybody, I want you to know about the greatness behind Noel Bentley. He mentioned public speaker. Yeah, he's not just a public speaker. He's an excellent public speaker. I've seen a few things he's done. You can Google and find that. One of his gifts is the humor part of speaking, which, by the way, Noel, you taught me. I'm not a guy who smiles very easy. A storyteller, an emcee. He was the emcee of the TEDx BearCreekPark event in front of 1,000 people at the Bell Center for Performing Arts, February 29th, 2020. It was rocked. And I remember saying to Noel that day that I believe his job was one of the most important, and he did a brilliant job of moving it along. And then he does some other things in the community. He's starting a project working with seniors to help engage the community, set goals, tell their story. He's got another project which is on hold because of our current world situation, but it will continue after, called Power of Three Speaking. And he's told you about his passion photography. So Noel, let's get into the story. I mean, take us back to the beginning. You came into this world. I don't know much about that chapter. You and I, when we met on through TED, I was given you as a gift to be my coach. And I just want to set this up that I was told by somebody associated with the organizing team that, Noel's your coach for a reason. He and you have some parallels in your story. And so take us back to where it all started, even if you want to talk about the diapers you wore.
What can we say with that? That's good Lord, it'll be a 50-year story soon, but it'll be one of these quarantine birthdays that people seem to be celebrating. It's funny. I don't really try not to think about the past too much. When we got hooked up, it's true, there was a parallel when they kind of left it at that. It's like, all right, you guys go figure that out. But yeah, I mean, I was adopted. If you really want to go back to diapers, I was adopted, or at least I was told that.
Okay.
Because you don't really figure that out. And it was only a couple of years ago when I was back in Calgary with my wife. We're walking through a park. And we hadn't been to this area, beautiful area called Bridgeland. And I look up and I see this huge brick wall. And on the wall is a sign. And I look at my wife and I go, you know what? It's been almost 50 years since I was last here. Wow. And she looks at me like I'm crazy. But it was true, because it said Calgary General Hospital. And that's the site where that building used to be until, I guess, only 1995. But that's where I was, adopted or handed over.
Yeah.
And that's where life sort of starts. So I was, I grew up as almost kind of a quasi-only child, because I was, what was it, 8 or 9 years younger than both of my sisters.
Yeah.
And like I said, we moved a lot. So if you're wondering a little insight into me, I'm kind of an independent type of person because I've always had to be. When you move and move and move and move, you learn is there permanency to anything, into relationships. And so that, who knows how that played into later development. I mean, that's a that's a $250 an hour question, I suppose, for a therapist.
Yeah, and you need, like I said in my TED talk, you got to get one of those.
Oh, I've had a few off and on. It's always a good idea. It's always a good idea to get people who know what they're doing to help you through, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to riff with you on this because that's how I interview. And by the way, nothing is edited here; it's raw and uncut. And I was making a note there about that, just that one word, adopted, and it had my mind go in several directions. I did an interview before, Noel, with a fellow named Steve Pemberton. He's written a book called "Place in the World," and it's actually was made into a movie. And I think he's a vice president of some large U.S. company and running for senator, believe it or not. Although I don't know why he would do that because he might ruin everything he's done up to this point. But when I talked to him and when I heard I watched the Steve Jobs movie, the Apple CEO passed away, and there was moments in that where he was mistreating his daughter. He couldn't find the way to treat people well. He didn't feel. And it came back to his backstory where he was abandoned when he was a young kid. I think his dad was a lawyer and his mom was a professional. And there's a scene on the roof of that building where Apple was at the end of the movie, where his daughter was pleading with him, saying, "Dad, why haven't you treated me well? And why this and why that?" Apparently, he's a millionaire. He wouldn't even pay his daughter's university fund. And he looks at her, and it was a moving moment for me because I have this parallel. I wasn't adopted, Noel, but my father left when I was 12. He said I was poorly made. Now, I'm not projecting that on you, but one of the things I loved about you, Noel, and everybody is Noel has this incredible way of bringing humor. He has such a nice personality. He's a good person. I would never know that was your backstory. So just take us from there. I mean, how did you navigate from, maybe being adopted and having to find what most of us need, nurturing parents through our childhoods to get to where we are in our life? Just tell us anything you want about that.
Yeah, the thing about being adopted is I always knew. It wasn't one of those movie style things where I found a paper in my parents' office or there was a phone call. There was no drama. As soon as I could speak, literally, my parents told me I was adopted, and no one cared.
Yeah.
And that's true. And so for my whole life, my parents were my parents, and I haven't really delved into it too far. There's some speeches I've done about it, but I mean, it's kind of interesting. You have to make of it what you decide to make of it. And but of course, I think that probably more so even than being adopted is that moving around, you get that sort of self-dependency, but you can also isolate.
Yeah.
One of the parallels we had when you've already kind of introduced it. Your talk, your TED talk was very important for me to see because it's very important for people to hear stories like yourself. I've run a parallel. There's not always the same one reason why people are depressed.
Yeah.
Or go down that very dark road. And so I had my time with it, but it started probably when I was 16 and just didn't know what was wrong, but something was wrong. Yeah. And I just couldn't figure it out. And it leads from there. And it's amazing on the, without guidance or mentorship where you can go. And you can go down some very dark roads. You go down alcohol dependency, all sorts of things. And the little irony there, because we've talked about how much we enjoy humor and sharing that with one another. And humor was unsurprisingly a crutch.
Yeah.
You hear about that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think about it's interesting because again, I'm going in this other direction with the name Robin Williams. I mean, I remember writing a blog post on that I was sad that day and we lost a great person, but he left us a legacy, right? And one of the things, Noel, that I appreciate about you is your ability to find humor. I could never laugh. I mean, my story, my TED Talks out there, people know about me. I couldn't laugh. And in fact, these muscles in my face, they don't work very well. My wife and I are watching TV, right? She's like half her personality is like a Noel. She's bubbly and she's got that ability to stay in the moment. And we're watching a crime drama and the guy takes a bullet to the head and I'm looking over at her like, what are you on crack cocaine? She's like chuckling. And I'm going, I'm stoic Tom here going like, well, the guy just took a bullet to the head. How could you? What I learned is, and much like dogs or animals, they can't have thoughts about their thoughts. One of my limitations is not being able to find humor. So getting back to you, when we met, I remember that one moment when we had a first conversation. You told me about your experience with depression and something had happened in your story, and it opened me up. It opened me up to say I can trust Noel because of my own journey. I think that's really a great thing. And then I couldn't figure out how to bring humor into a serious talk on leadership, mental health. I honestly know I was resisting it, because I thought I'd be poking fun of it. So before we go into that a little bit, because I want to really get this going about the humor side and the storytelling, just some of the things you can teach us. I read in your bio that not only mental health was a important step in your life, but alcohol as well. And as you may or may not know, my father was an alcoholic, passed away in January, and I've always, been aware of how alcohol can help. And I remember having this rule that if I pick up a drink, I now ask myself the question, why do I want this? And if the answer is to calm what's going on in my head, then maybe I should put it down. If it's because the bouquet of the wine is awesome and I just love the label, yeah, that's a good thing. Just talk a little bit about that. Teach us something about going through things like depression, whatnot, and just how you navigated through that, and even alcohol.
Yeah, I mean to be fair, I mean alcohol was always a big part. It was modeled in my family. My parents drank. Their friends drank when you came over in the parties in the '70s and stuff. I mean, those were the days where people drank and they got in their cars and went home, and it was you laughed it off. It was a different world, and one that we've really grown to realize the shortcomings of, to say the least. But alcohol was always around. And it was something that, when being relatively shy person and sensitive, to be honest, alcohol was also a wonderful social lubricant. So it had, not only was it, relatively enjoyable, depending on what you buy. When you're in university, you can't afford the good stuff. So regardless, or even in high school when you're stealing your parents' stuff. But it loosened me up. It made me more fun. It let things out. People, I interacted more. It broke down those barriers that I was not able to break down on my own. But of course, not being able to handle it properly, and the fact that it is an addictive substance, and then it just went from there. By third year university, I was drinking too much, and you pair that with issues with depression, and now you've got a nice double whammy happening, and you just don't take care of your health, your mental health, your physical health. So there was quite a slide at the end of university. It took me forever to finish my degree, which I finally did get, of course, in psychology. Why wouldn't it be anything else, right?
I have a CEO friend. He said, he said I wanted to be after he read my book, he said I wanted to be a psychologist, but then I'd probably want to kill half of my patients.
It's true. It is so true. And that was just really when I just was completely directionless, rudderless for a few years. And you basically rebuild and reinvent yourself is what you do. And it's kind of start from the bottom, literally finding a job, getting an apartment, getting things going in the right direction. And you want it to, things can spiral in good directions too. And that's what you just try and build on.
Exactly.
And be wary of it. So off and on in my life, I've, drank at other times. Other times I've just had to say, you know what, that's it. No drinking, period. And go times of complete abstinence. It just makes life better. So, yeah, I mean, that drink, that's, sort of something you like to consider in the past and keep it there. But the depression issue of it or side of it, that's never really in the past. You just realize that it's part of you and where it came from potentially, and why it is part of your life. And even if you can't completely figure it out, you have to realize that you have to live with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've talked about it openly. Not sure if I told you, but I was sent to a course called Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. And when I say therapy, people say, "Ooh, there's something wrong with you." I go, "Yeah, you're damn right." So it's like we go to business school to learn skills. Well, cognitive is your cognition, your thoughts. Behavior is how your thoughts behave, and therapy is learning how to think different. And what I learned when I slipped into depression from, no pun, my slip and fall in a bathtub, back to the TED Talk, is that uh, everybody experiences depression in their life. If you have a loss of a loved one or a bad day at work, you can feel down, depressed. But the clinical diagnosis I heard about this is that if it's 2 weeks or more where you're sad, but there's no trigger event, then you're in a cycle of depression. You gotta get some guidance. And for me, slipping into that, I had my first suicidal thoughts in the TED Talk, which you helped me so much. How to present that. It was bizarre because I was driving in my car and that just occurred, and I said, "Where the heck did that come from?" And then I'm going to just share with you one other thought I had not long ago, where my daughter's in university back east. I love my daughter. She watched my TED Talk virtually thanks to that streaming. And I had this vision that she was in her apartment hanging by a rope. I'm not saying that to make this a negative show, but I didn't understand it. And I asked my psychiatrist, I told him about it. And he said, Tom, suicidal thoughts are not just about yourself, but it can be visions of harming others or others being harmed. And so I learned all this, but what I really learned to get through it for myself, Noel is, finished with this, is that it wasn't just about looking at medication. It was about learning to train my brain how to think different. And so there's three things that I'll put out there. We have a thought, and then it creates a emotion or a sensation, and then it creates a behavior. And there's two pathways from there. One is to react, or one is to respond. And I guess with me, my thought processes have always been racing in my mind, and they always take the react pathway because there's things still wired in me from my past that were creating too much negative thinking. But what's the beauty of it? Much like what we saw at TED with a speaker, there's that through neuroplasticity, you can teach and train your brain how to think differently. And so I would never have known when you and I first met that you went through this cycle. And that's why I say leaders, they keep in desperation. They don't talk about it. This is a hard driving question. If it's uncomfortable, don't answer. But did you ever have a suicidal thought or anything like that during your depression?
Well, I did. I gave it. I was involved in TEDx Bear Creek last year.
Yeah.
And there was a speaker who talked about the loss of her husband. And after she spoke in that, I said, you know what? I've talked about my issues before, but I'm just doing my talk. I got to get this out. And for some reason, seeing her do it just was enough to say, all right, I'm going to do it. So I gave a 12-minute talk at a Toastmaster group. In fact, it was one of the spaces that you practice in. And it was pretty raw. I just decided, you know what? The heck with this. I'm tired of this. And I knew these people quite well, so there's the risk. They're going to see something they didn't know was coming. They usually know me as, kind of funny, right? Like having fun and crazy, interesting stories. Well, this story was completely different. There was very little humor. And it was a 12-minute of those days in university with some prelude and some afterwards. But I did talk about how fast that went downhill, and when I did decide that it was, I didn't want to stay on this earth anymore, and made that quite, how shall we say, not graphic, but I think I made people very uncomfortable the way I explained it and showed it.
Yeah.
So the answer is yes. There's always that call of the void that people have, and I wouldn't even call it an unhealthy thing. The thoughts of suicide, when you go back to, who is it? It's Albert Camus, the French existentialist philosopher.
Yeah.
It's the only question: is life worth living? And I read a book called The Myth of Sisyphus about 5 times, very short. Didn't get through it the first 4 times, and then I read it the 5th time, and it all clicked.
Yeah.
And making those decisions. So the answer is yes. And there's just a point in your time in your life where you can answer those questions in a way that's meaningful for you, and there can actually be some positivity from it. But it's a hugely dangerous time. You really, isolating at those times is probably the worst thing you can do. You really have to know where to go to get help, and therefore, yeah. So I've been down that path, and I don't imagine ever being down it again. But you're always on guard for it.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, honor you for sharing it. I mean, it takes a lot of humility and to be vulnerable and share that kind of story. But as you know me, the world needs to hear those stories and hear about people who have navigated through it. I'm learning more and more, Noel, through many people that I interview that are in top leadership roles that people look at as icons, that they all have a story like that. And I came up with my own little narrative, and I'll just put this out there about this whole thing about suicidal thoughts. It's probably all wrong, but it works for me. and, and it goes back to the brain science that I learned in this course is that we have their thinking patterns that are wired, their synaptic connections, our neurons in our brain embed thoughts and emotions. Well, where do we get all that stuff? It comes from the media, it comes from movies, it comes from stories. I mean, how many times do we watch shows and see images and stories of suicide? And back when I was a kid, they found my young cousin, age 10, hanging in a barn from a rope. I mean, this was like crazy. And they started blaming it on listening to vinyl records, heavy metal, playing it backwards. I thought that's nuts. But then I went and got a vinyl record and played it backwards to see if I could figure it out. I never did, except I destroyed my records. But what I'm what I'm getting at here is this: is that what I realize is that from learning about cognitive thinking is that we have the brain was wired to reptilian brain to think the worst first, and so the limbic system, which is the part of the brain that basically goes first, so let's just say I have a feeling of feeling blah. My brain says, okay, we got to help Tom figure out what that is. And if I've seen images or emotions or things in the past that are blah, my brain says, that's it. That's the cousin in the barn. That's the Robert Williams. So my brain basically takes that and then it justifies it. And then I take action from it. And it can't work out well. But the limbic system or the prefrontal cortex, which sits above limbic system, which basically is a big brother, it steps in and says, wait a minute, that isn't what you're experiencing. Let's pause. Let's not go back to the old thoughts. Let's come up with a new thought. Is that really what's going on? Does it really serve a purpose? Is what you're feeling now really the same as Robin Williams? So you pause, you become mindful and think about your thoughts, which we have the power to do. Plants, animals, and other species don't. We're the only ones who can think about our thoughts. And then we analyze it. So Tony Robbins said this once to me at an event. He's a mentor. He said, people are on this crazy 8 all their life, going around like an 8. And he said, we go up and down, up and down. He said, if you want to commit suicide, he says, you're going to do it. He said, people go around that 8 and some of them go off the 8 and they take themselves out. The ones that stay on, they really are searching for other things, whether it's happiness, significance, or they really are the ones who can survive it. So at least that's a story I use now. And I feel I'm feeling much better managing that depression, and I'm on the other side of it. So let's flip this over now that we've created this dark cloud, which is which people are listening to. And by the way, everybody, this is powerful because I believe, Noel, that you're one of the strongest people on the planet. And I'm not saying that for any ego, that you have to go through adversity to be able to develop the strength. And now you find that and do things with it. So talk to us a bit about, the work you're doing with humor and storytelling. Just what are you doing with your gifts? And tell us more about why humor matters.
Yeah, I really like going that route. It is, we talk about humor, and you talked about it and brought it up before. People are often reticent to use humor in talks, and especially talks that have a serious emotional weight, because we feel that we're lessening or mocking, or we're in some way taking away or disrespecting the subject matter. And that can appear the case. You can use humor improperly. It's a talent and a skill and something you practice and you use and learn how to use it. But what I've sort of realized after sort of helping people and coaching them through 3 TEDx's now is there's just ways to find humor, and humor is incredibly broad, and that laughter is incredibly important to human beings. It bonds communities and groups and people. And it also has its own other powers. Of satire. You look at probably some of the most respected news people in America are people like Colbert,
yep,
and Jon Stewart, and they use satire to put it to say what they have to say, but they're also the most truthful. I mean, humor allows you to explore deeper, darker places with a little bit of safety. You can laugh or cry, is what we often say when we're going through terrible times. Having the ability to look at something and create humor out of it is a very strong, powerful tool. And I think that's where we get that stereotype, not a stereotype, but if you say, oh, it's a stand-up comedian, if someone tells you they suffered from depression, that is probably how should we put that? You're not shocked. Yeah. Like we hear about that. I used to joke, I'm doing a little humor class. Noel, where do you get your humor from? How do I become funny? I said, first, you suffer from crippling depression. And we start from there. And now we're set. And people look at me like, are you serious? I'm like, no, I'm not serious. But, it helps. We joke about things we give ourselves power. We try and disempower things that are scary. And we actually try and use humor as light. Even if we call it dark humor. And what I've realized is that there's so much humor, and even in the simplest things. Even I have a tendency to go crazy with humor in terms of subject matter. I love absurd stories that start from the normal, and by the end, you're just in a place you never thought you'd be at. But I really learned that not everyone has to go there. We all have our own humor. We all have things that make us laugh, and we can all use it. But it's a skill and it's a risk. But it's a risk worth taking. Like a lot of things, it's okay doing it poorly at first because you'll just get better and you'll enjoy it. So yeah, I try and preach and show people that you can use it in your life anywhere. You can use it in all your talks. You just have to learn how to use it well. And once you do, you'll be thrilled with what it brings to your life. So that's why I just enjoy, no matter what I do. If I'm not laughing every day, sometimes I feel it like the same way if you don't exercise.
Yeah.
You start feeling it, or if you eat a crappy food or overeat for a couple days or overindulge. Same thing. If you miss humor, you'll realize, oh my goodness, I really needed it the next time I laugh. And you'll go, oh yeah, right. I forgot. I've been in a dark space for a couple weeks or a couple days, whatever it might be. So I'm trying to bring it into everything I do with speaking as best as I can.
Yeah, I can see why the community work with seniors. The other side of it too is like people like you. When I hear you sometimes using your humor, it's almost like childlike, and it's a gift. It's like kids would hover to that. But it goes back to what I was telling you about what I learned, that the brain can't have a positive and negative thought at the same time. So it's like so simple. If I just laugh and fuel my brain with nourishing, humor, or watch a funny movie, it puts me in the space, right? And that's why I think it's pretty cool. Do you have a favorite comedian, or one or two, or none?
I have some, and I think I have this discussion often with my wife, like, what's your favorite, or what do you enjoy with anything? And with me, as I mentioned before, it always changes. I've always enjoyed cerebral humor, and people like Stephen Wright. Yep. A storyteller like Woody Allen is fantastic. Mitch Hedberg is someone I've gone back to recently. He's a very quick hitter.
Yeah.
But even a great storyteller like Eddie Boy is someone I really miss.
What's that again? Eddie who?
Yeah, his name is Danny Boy.
Danny Boy.
Yeah, and I believe he is from Scotland. But just a brilliant storyteller that can go off in all sort of directions and pull you back. And I saw him live one time, and he just go, if I could do that. That sort of thing. Yeah, it's BHOY, Danny Boy. And I think he went away for a while as well, but he just brings you into his world, and you're just glad for having been there.
That's very cool. I just want to share with everybody how, when I was working with you, Noel, on my talk, I couldn't get it. And so one of the most effective ways that Noel was able to help me is, and this is what I liked about you, Noel, you didn't sometimes it's feeling vulnerable, telling somebody, I don't get this. You don't want to be made fun of, but I really didn't get it. And so what Noel does as a coach is he took my script and he looked through it, and you did something really cool. You said, here's 3 or 4 points where something humorous might work. And you didn't tell me what to do, but you gave me a couple suggestions. I think out of that, you getting my brain on that track, I actually stumbled on the Black Knight, the Monty Python idea, which was part of what went into it. And there's a couple things that you you gave me that became part of my TED Talk. What's really funny, Noel, is as I'm listening to the video, I'm hearing the audience kind of chuckle when they hear those parts. And I'm still going like, what the, I don't get it. What, how's that funny? But it works. And so I want to thank you for that. Tell us about the TEDx. Just if somebody wants to become a TEDx speaker, you are the program coordinator. What are you looking for going forward? Anything you want to talk about there? Because I'm sure people will hear this interview and go, maybe I want to be one of those, or maybe Noel could be my coach.
Yeah. For TEDx, obviously, we're going to wait and see what happens. But in the summer, what we do is we start looking for people. And when we say we're looking for people with ideas. And those have to be ideas that will help others. They'll engage others. They're ideas that the world needs to know. And they don't have to be overly complex. They don't have to be scientific. They can be super simple.
Yep.
But it also helps that we may have, if it's going to be something, a subject matter we've heard on before, you've got to have a spin on it that is fresh. It's not that there's nothing new under the sun, but we realize you might tread or attach to something else.
Yep.
Like yours, Tom. When you brought in the leadership angle of it, it was something that people really needed to hear. We felt
right,
and we kind of looked at each other like, well, yeah, I guess we aren't hearing that message, are we? All right, well, that's now we need to hear this. So there you are. We also need people who have a little bit of speaking experience because, as you know, last time there's 1,000 seats in that theater, and when it's filled, and it basically was last time. I mean, it can't be your first time on stage ever.
Oh, I'm telling you, the adrenaline was pumping. Hey, you were the MC, and one of the things I did was I went down to TEDx Seattle. I think, you went too, as part of my learning before this, when we did locally. And I noticed that the MC there had cue cards. Man, how did you remember? I mean, it's one thing to learn to do one TED Talk, but you remembered all these introductions and stuff, and you did it like without cards. Any secret to that? Or were you cheating? It was on the back of your eyelids or something?
Yeah. You kill me, Tom. You are so well prepared. You just see everything. And it's true. I watched that. She was a great MC. But there were certain things I said I would like to do more.
Yeah.
And I said I really want to do it without cue cards to try and create a connection with the audience, which all of our TEDx speakers need to have connections with the audience. And so I don't want to break that by always having cue cards. But I did have cue cards. Here's the thing. I had almost 30 separate cue cards, one for each time I came out on stage. And but I could only carry one at a time because you don't want to need your cue card. Bring out 30 of them all on stage, right?
Disaster.
Yeah. So every time I go backstage, I'm taking one out, putting it in sequence, and then bringing the next one out, making sure practicing my lines. Because the speakers hadn't finished, I didn't have my all the intros and stuff ready to memorize till 2 weeks before. So I'm not really sure how it worked. I just repeated and practiced, and walked up and down my streets like as we were starting, and said it out loud to the trees, and hope to God that it was all going to be there that day. And you put your faith in yourself that the work you've done, it's going to be there. And I really did want to be able to do it without you. That was a personal thing that meant a lot to me, and it really helped because then you focus on the audience and you want to give it them, and then you realize that what you're saying, or even the humor that you're using, when it's working, when it's not, it was great. And I had one cue card in my hand. that no one noticed, but the last person, because he changed his talk at the last, very close to the end, I kept that cue card because I didn't want to screw up his introduction, but I never looked at it. And I was like, yay, I didn't look at it. So you can catch me there. But other than that, it was just, I don't know, that whole day flowed. And there's just something about being part of an event that just flows from start to finish, and it never really came back down.
Yeah, absolutely. I have so many people that went to it and said it was, they said they'll be back next year, and it was a production like no other they'd seen. And I was just blown away at when you did the MC, but the transitions of being seamless. And I was thinking, you and I parked close by in the parking lot, and after I was looking in your back seat for Scotch bottles to see if how did you deal with the anxiety and all that stuff. I remember in the dry run, by the way, the week before we went and did the whole thing at the Bell Center dress rehearsal, and there was a moment where there was a technology glitch, and you literally had to go into your little, I mean, you had to hold everybody together. That's something I think you have a gift. So do you do professional MC work? If people want you to MC events, are you open to doing that, or is it just something you did for?
I am. I've done a bunch of different, I mean, weddings. I've done a couple, weddings for friends where they, and you go and do that. That's fun. All those Toastmaster events and other things. Now I've emceed other, TEDx's and other events. I'm certainly there. I really take it seriously as an MC, because your job there is ultimately to make sure that there's people that are speaking, and the reason you're there, and that the audience and everyone else loves it. You've got to be like the world's best waiter. At the end of it, they kind of remember you. But you're not supposed to be the star as much as you'd want to be. But you're right. The technical glitches were probably the most fun. Like, you prepare for it, though. That's actually the thing. You have to have everything prepared. So I had a few things of, like, I wouldn't call it stand-up, but humorous stories that I had ready. Like, if we had a 5, 6, 7 minute glitch there, I would have had more material. I was ready with it. And when we actually had a small glitch that day where they couldn't get the guitar mic'd up fast enough. Yeah. So there was about a 2 minute. And you know what? I'll be honest with you, Tom. I really enjoyed those moments. It was fun.
I agree. Yeah. Well, people who saw each individual TED Talk, by the way, they're released now on TED.com and the TEDx site. You got to watch it. Certainly check out mine. Nobody saw you because the TED Talks are edited without the MC. But I just appeal to everybody, come to the next TEDx BearCreekPark and watch Noel. I think you need to up the ante, man. I think you need to ask the Oscars if they can get you in there. A Canadian on an American stage, you could teach them a thing or two. But I think it's another example of how humor just keeps the audience engaged. So that's just awesome. One question for you before we move to wrapping this up, and that I like to ask you, a little known fact. What's a little known fact that you think people who know you don't know about you?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's going to be tough. I threw out the adopted one earlier on.
Okay.
Which was, quite a different one. For speaking, a little known fact, I wouldn't suspect, I have had 2 occasions absolutely catastrophic public speaking experiences in my life. Just like, not just bombing.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking blitzkrieg level, and in university. Yeah, it was awful. I've had my backside handed to me a few times. I think that's why I couldn't have been more terrified of public speaking in my life about 10 years ago. And I don't know why. I just decided I needed to do it. Actually, I have no idea why I wanted to do it. It's kind of like photography. I decided I was going to go get a camera, and now I'm going to do it. So something in there triggered me, Tom, and something just below conscious level. It triggered me to the 2 things that I love the most to do with my time.
Well, you just, riffing with you is interesting because you sent my mind somewhere, so I'm going to take another minute. When you said that, I thought about Robin Williams. I thought about myself. And I don't know if I could explain this. My brain works differently than others. But when we've discovered that, when we're in pain sometimes in our life and we discover the antidote, and we realize that if the antidote helps us, maybe there's a purpose behind it. Maybe we can just spread that antidote to others in the world to bring them joy. Robin Williams was a guy who struggled throughout his life, but he knew that humor kept him moving forward. And I think that was his drug of choice. And for me, it's like when I got on the stage at TEDx BearCreekPark, I felt like Michael Jackson. I mean, I don't think I told you enough, but when I see myself in the camera, I'm looking back, or in the mirror, I'm looking back and going, who's that ugly guy? or who's that guy who can't speak? And then when I got on the stage and I watch it back after, seriously, I'm going like, what? It just feels good. And it's like that purpose inside me. I know that I'm bringing something to people that's changing their life. I think that's what you do. You bring something to people, and that's why you need to be on the stage. You and I should do a duo once. You can probably beat the crap out of me for being boring and stoic, and then I can just shoot back at you for being such an idiot who's on crack cocaine and laughs too much. But I'm just kidding.
I don't know, Tom. You asked for that. Oh my God, that little piece of, all right, fine. You created this image for people, but the little known fact is that my Toastmaster group 7 years ago,
Yeah.
It was Grumpy Cat. Like when I left Edmonton, they gave me a Grumpy Cat T-shirt. I literally have a not a custom made, but imported from the States Grumpy Cat puppet just to honor that.
Is that what I saw on your desk there?
Yeah, she's my microphone stand. I put it on her ear.
Oh my God, we could go places with the Black Knight and Grumpy Cat on a stage one day. Anyway, that's just all too awesome. Hey, listen, as we wrap this up, I want to just honor you with some leadership words. I do this on every show. No, they're not scripted. You've seen me writing through the video. The first one is humor. When we say the word humor, you are it. 2 is love. You're humble, but there's love that comes out of you. Love and caring. You're certainly one of the people that I work with that made me feel like I mattered. Passion. When you talk about that humor, you can see this change and this shift. It's awesome. And then wisdom. Read the book Outliers, where Gladwell talks about mavens, people you go to when you want to know something. I really think, everybody, that if you want to go to a man who can teach you from being in the darkest hours to how to use humor to not only improve your life, but make others feel happy and joy, Noel's the guy. So get a hold of him, make him your coach, become a TED speaker, whatever. Get a puppet. I don't know. Maybe you're going to hang out with him. just do it. So Noel, back to you for the last word, and tell us where people can get a hold of you or your body of work if they need to.
Well, I appreciate that, Tom. Yeah, one of the easier ways for people to do it is I do have that project, that power3speaking.com.
Yeah.
So that they can actually go through there. My email on there is Noel.Bentley@power3speaking.com. But I'll be honest, I'm all for putting myself out there as well. Noel.Bentley@shaw.ca. If you ever had to guess an email for me, that would be it. I'm perfectly comfortable with people contacting me, and I find, like you said, when you get out there and engage with people, good things happen.
All right, there it is, everybody. Noel Bentley, just like the car. Get a hold of Noel and support his work. Get to know him, even for a cup of coffee. Noel, thanks for doing this. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Tom. I had no idea how good an interviewer you were. I've only listened to your podcast, but seeing you, and I get to see you in action. People don't see that. I get like all 3 dimensions of it. It's fantastic. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Everybody, find this. You found it. Give it a high rating on your podcast channel so we can honor Noel's work, and find that passion like you see in Noel. Live your life with purpose and live the life that you deserve and desire.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca